In the spring of 2008, I was living in the San Fernando Valley part of Los Angeles, teaching high school English. On a Monday morning of my commute to school, I saw a billboard that said, "I hate Sarah Marshall," and had a website. I was deeply grossed out by this billboard. It was in an inexpensive part of the valley, so I assumed that a guy had been dumped and put up a revenge porn website and was advertising it. But once the week was over and I was driving around LA outside of my commute route, I started to see that the billboard was everywhere. I don't remember when it became clear to me that this was part of an advertising stunt for the 2008 movie that we are covering today, Forgetting Sarah Marshall. But I do know that it was only weeks later that I found myself defending the fantastic comedic merits of the film. I apparently had totally forgotten the initial impression it had made on me. Now, 17 years after Forgetting Sarah Marshall's release, my reaction to it is actually best summed up between that deep revulsion and absolute adoration of the film. The plot of Forgetting Sarah Marshall revolves around Peter, played by one of the writers of the movie, Jason Segel. Peter is a TV composer for a Law and Order type show that features his girlfriend, Sarah Marshall, in the lead role. Sarah, played fantastically by Kristen Bell, comes home from a trip and breaks up with Peter, from his point of view, out of the blue. Peter refuses to put his pants on for the breakup in what has become a famous moment of male full frontal comedy.
You just put some clothes on, okay?
I'm not going to go put clothes on. I know what that means. If I put clothes on, it's over, okay?
Eventually, Sarah tells Peter that she's slept with someone else, and he accepts that she's really dumping him, and he falls apart.
Oh, hey, what are you burning, man? Come on.
It's everything. It's everything that reminds me of her, and I need it gone, okay? I thought I was fine, right? And I'm not. I'm not fine at all.
He gets his stepbrother, played by Bill Hader, to come trolling for women with him, and has a series of very unsexy one-night stands. Since screwing around doesn't help, Peter decides to get away from it all.
I could go to Hawaii. Sarah was always talking about this place in Hawaii that was supposed to be nice.
I wouldn't go there.
What, I can't go to Hawaii now because Sarah Marshall has heard of Hawaii?
You can go to Hawaii. Go to Hawaii.
Once he gets there, though, he sees Sarah is at the hotel with her new boyfriend, Aldous Snow.
What are you doing here?
Came here to murder you.
Really, what are you doing here?
Aldous is a famous pop star played by Russell Brand, who I have to pause and say has numerous rape allegations against him now. All of this unravels in front of Rachel, who is working the front desk of the hotel. Rachel is played by Mila Kunis and covers for Peter, checking him in for free to a $5,000 a night suite, telling him that he has to clean up after himself, but otherwise he can stay for free. There, he sobs so much that people complain that a woman is making too much noise. Women, they do that. A room becomes available, but it's right next to Sarah's. Peter is shuffled into it, pushing he and Sarah into even closer contact on their separate vacations. Even though Peter now has to see his ex-girlfriend with her new hot boyfriend all over the place, he still starts getting into the vacation groove. He takes surfing lessons. He becomes friendly with some of the staff at the hotel. He even asks out Rachel and goes to a locals party where he tells Rachel about his secret dream to write a Dracula puppet musical, which Sarah never understood.
Why Dracula?
Because he's a man like anyone else. He just wants to be loved. And every time he gets close to a human woman, he ends up smothering and killing her, which is a feeling I am familiar with.
Rachel gets it. And then, on a very Hawaiian, locals, not touristy hike, Rachel and Peter end up kissing. The romantic drama comes to a head when Sarah and Aldous and Rachel and Peter end up on a deeply intense double date. The two couples end up going back to their respective rooms and having a version of competitive sex. Rachel and Peter are more connected than ever. Sarah and Aldous, however, break up, and it becomes clear that Aldous has been cheating on Sarah their whole relationship. Post her breakup, Sarah finds out that hers and Peter's show isn't being renewed. Brought low, she goes back to Peter and begs to get back together with him.
What if I made a really, really horrible mistake?
They hook up. Peter can't get hard and storms off.
Maybe the problem is that you broke my heart into a million pieces, and so my cock doesn't want to be around you anymore, okay? Ever!
He immediately goes and confesses his lapse in fidelity to Rachel, and Rachel breaks up with him.
Rachel, please don't do this. The only reason I'm telling you this is because I really care about...
Listen to me, Peter. I was a mess too, I understand, okay? But it does not excuse you acting like a complete asshole.
He chivalrously goes to a local bar and pulls down a topless photo of Rachel, but she is unmoved by the gesture and sends him away. He returns to LA, single, but changed. He's a more authentic artist now. He gets to work on his Dracula musical. And who shows up at opening night but Rachel? In another scene with full frontal nudity from Jason Segel, Rachel and Peter get back together as we hear the sound of one of Peter's Dracula songs. The sad boy has found his voice, and in 2008, I experienced this as progress in terms of feminism. It lands a little differently now. I'm Vanessa Zoltan.
I'm Hannah McGregor.
And this is Hot and Bothered. Hannah, this movie made me sad.
I watched it last night with my dear friend, Erin Wonker, author of Notes from a Feminist Killjoy, noted feminist critic. And it was her first time ever seeing this movie. And I felt at multiple points embarrassed to be showing it to her.
Yeah. Were you like, Vanessa made me do it?
No, my recollection of this, which might be apocryphal, is that I am the one who wanted this movie on the roster. But I certainly remembered finding it very funny.
Me too. I loved this movie and I considered it one of my favorite rom-coms for years. And this time it bummed me out. I think
it's a downer.
I think this movie hates women.
Yeah, it sure does. The misogyny is really steeped through this movie. The titular Sarah Marshall, like, we're forgetting her in a very, like, one must doom Sarah Marshall to misery. Sarah Marshall is the bad guy of this movie, and Sarah Marshall has got to get her comeuppance. But the romantic lead, Mila Kunis's character, who replaces her, also a pretty misogynist character.
Yeah, I think that what made me sad was watching Kristen Bell and Mila Kunis, two actresses who I don't know a ton about, but the things that I know about them, like, I respect these women. These are like smart women who I think are interested in like making good art in the world. And I was watching them be complicit in their own humiliation. And I was like, oh, this is so degrading.
So, you know that like monologue, that sort of extended piece in Gone Girl about the figure of the cool girl?
Oh, yeah. We talked about it a lot on the How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days part of this because yeah, of course.
Yeah, the cool girl is very much at work in this movie, sort of textually within the movie, but I can also sort of feel it in the reason why somebody like Kristen Bell would take this role in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything cooler than making a movie in which part of the point of the movie is how much you suck as a woman?
Yep.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah, it's a very I'm not like other women movie.
It's a very I'm not like other women movie. Wow. I think that Mila Kunis's character, Rachel, actually says that at one point.
I know.
When, like, Peter's getting up to get her a drink. And she's like, I'm not like other girls. You don't have to wait on me. And it's like, oh, so we're just saying that out loud, huh?
She doesn't. I don't think she literally says that. I think she says, I'm not
one of those girls you have
to wait on. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, well, let's jump in. What does this movie believe about love? I actually found this question easy. I do think that this movie believes things about love.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Undeniably. It's a movie about heterosexual romantic love and its dangers for men.
Okay, I'm going to come in with my Pollyanna view. I think it believes some nice things about love. Some interesting takes on love. Not hot ones, but it has a perspective. I think, for example, that this movie believes that we can love the wrong people for the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah.
Peter, the main character, Jason Segel's character, says at one point to his stepbrother, played by Bill Hader. I find Bill Hader very funny in this movie.
Bill Hader is charming in everything.
He can't help it. So Peter is yelling at his stepbrother, played by Bill Hader. Bill Hader has compared Sarah Marshall to his wife. And Peter says, Sarah's not like other girls. Like, Sarah's a TV star goddess, and therefore she's not a human woman. And how dare you compare her to a mere mortal?
He says she's better.
Yeah. And that's a bad reason to love someone. And I think that this movie thinks that that's a bad reason to love someone. I think this movie judges Peter for that moment.
Yes, absolutely. There's definitely an awareness that part of what Peter loves about Sarah is that she is like universally perceived as hot and cool and famous and desirable. We've talked about this in earlier episodes, but like the idea of him gaining cultural capital through the sexual capital of his partner is very much there. I don't know to what degree it is lessened by the romantic partner he ends up with, but there is a sense that he's like, at least in part, in that relationship for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and I think that that's right, that when you are in a relationship with somebody as a trophy in any way or as a way to build your own confidence when you're thinking about status in your relationship, that's a bad vibe. And like, that's not a healthy reason to be in a relationship with anyone. Yeah. The other thing that I think that this movie believes about love is that being in a relationship with the wrong person can hold us back from being our true best selves. And that being in a relationship with someone who supports you and is going to encourage you
to make your weird art.
Yeah, will like lead to you being really happy making community theater, right? And like, that's also a nice thing, right? Like, you want a partner who's like, I believe in your weird dream. I love your weird dream. I'm going to support you.
Yes, 100%. There is a very clear sense that Rachel is supportive of his weird art and celebrates it and thinks that it is cool and like not only understands it, but helps him understand it better.
Yeah.
And that is directly contrasted to Sarah just being like, I just don't understand it. Literally saying, I just don't understand it.
I will say, I think Sarah comes off well in that scene, though, about not understanding his art. She says to him, like, I don't get it. Can we please leave it at that? I love that you're making it. Please keep making it. I just don't get it. And he's like, no, listen again.
Listen to it again.
And I'm like, oh, I've been in that dynamic. Yeah. My beautiful ex-husband equated him reading my book, made for a wide audience, with me trying to read his book, which is a textbook of crystallography. And I was like, I can't read your book. Right? And him being like, no, just try again. And me being like, I don't get
it. Yeah. And there is also, there is the sense that being with the right person supports you in achieving your dreams. There's also a very clear sense of like, from the movie's perspective of like whose dreams matter the most here. And it's definitely Peter's. I would love to just like have a sentence about what Rachel is apparently going to be studying in university.
She's going to be studying school.
She's come back to do school. It's like, okay, so her dreams and ambitions are sort of just like really, really not central here.
In my little like wants to look at the best version of this movie, heart, she's gonna study hospitality in order to have a bigger, better job at the hotel.
In 5 years, she's going to own that hotel.
That's right. One other thing, and then we can start talking about the horrible things this movie believes. Although even in the things that I'm defending, I'm like, it's not great. I do think that this movie believes that romantic love and careers are entangled. And that is not something that When Harry Met Sally thinks through at all. That is not something that like a lot of movies think about. And this movie does really see romantic love and careers as impacting one another. And that's like a refreshing thing to see.
Yeah. And it's interested in the question of like, if somebody in a relationship is ambitious and or successful, to what degree does the other person in that relationship have to put their dreams on hold, make sacrifices, right? That like Alda Snow assumes Sarah's show has been canceled, and so she will spend 18 months being the head groupie for his band. And she's like, I am a working actress. And he's like, well, not anymore, you're not.
Yeah.
But in some ways, Sarah is experiencing what Peter experienced being in a relationship with her, which was a sense of like, your dreams and goals are going to be secondary to the more successful member of this partnership. And that is also there in the backstory about Rachel and her ex.
Right.
That he was a really successful competitive surfer, and she gave up school and relocated to Hawaii to support him, and then he cheated on her. So there is this sense of like, when you are with somebody who is ambitious, you have to make sacrifices, and that renders you vulnerable.
Yep.
Or in all of these cases, that more successful member of the couple is cheating on the person.
Yep.
That does certainly create a sort of through line of one should be suspicious of their successful partner.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think we see any examples of people who are like conventionally successful in their careers and not creeps.
Jason Segel at the beginning of the movie is successful in his career.
Yeah, I mean, he's scoring for her show, but the E! News piece that sets up the dynamic of their relationship.
Yes, he's the beta.
It really puts him as the beta and is like, you've never heard of him, but, and we know that, like he says later on that he hates the work. Like he doesn't find the work professionally or artistically or emotionally satisfying. Like he's making money as a musician, but I don't think he's successful in the ways that this movie is thinking about success, which is largely about sort of fame and cultural power.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I haven't made a defense that I think that what this movie has to say about love is necessarily things that I agree with. I guess my point is that it is making some substantial arguments about love. It does have some substantive thoughts about romantic relationships.
Yeah, and I think the biggest substantive thought that it has, it really comes together in the scene where Rachel and Peter jump off the cliff. That is the moment when, like, they are having their sort of big conversation about the way that being dumped by people they really cared about changed them. And Peter says, like, it also makes you braver, right? Like, you've lost what you didn't think you could handle losing. And so now you've got nothing else to lose. And that's the moment where she sort of convinces him to literally take a big leap. I mean, it's a pretty on-the-nose metaphor, but nonetheless. You know, the other scene that I think shows us something nice about what this movie believes about love is the first time that Peter and Rachel have sex.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're both drunk. They are next door to Sarah and Aldous, and Sarah hears them having sex and wakes Aldous up to try to, like, competitively have louder sex.
Yeah, competitive sex. We all do it.
And I think it's really important that in that scene, both Rachel and Peter are having a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're both laughing. They both think it's silly. They are both enjoying being together, but also enjoying this, like, silly competition. And I think there's a real sense that love should be fun.
Yep.
For the most part, you should be having a fun time when you are with the person who you love.
And all of the montages that show Peter and Sarah having been happy together are them having fun, right? Like they're playing Dance Dance Revolution, they're wrestling, right? Like it is very silly, lighthearted fun when he is looking back romantically and fondly and longingly on their past relationship.
I also think one of the things that we see in those flashbacks is that there is a risk of romantic love being emasculating for straight men.
Yep.
That like one of the worst things that being with Sarah did to Peter was render him subservient to her.
One of the worst things that has happened to Peter in his life is that he has had to hold Sarah's purse.
Yeah, while she was literally doing her job.
This should be evidence of how great your relationship was. And yet the movie wants me to believe that this is evidence about how bad your relationship was.
Yeah, and it culminates in what he is like when he grieves her. Because the first half of this movie is really concerned with how emasculating it is that Peter is grieving her, right? There's that scene where he's arrived at the resort in Hawaii and he's been put up in the fancy suite. And we get this shot of him just sobbing by the open window. And then Rachel calls and is like, hey, are you doing okay? We've been getting complaints about a woman crying.
Yeah.
And later on, when they're doing the cliff diving,
I can see your vagina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And so there's a very clear sense that like Peter has been emasculated by being in a relationship with a woman who is more successful than him. And that part of what he needs is to be in a relationship that allows him to reclaim his masculinity. And that the way that he reclaims his masculinity is by being in a relationship with a cool girl who doesn't attempt to manage him, control him, doesn't make him hold a purse.
She would never make him hold a purse. She
does not have a purse.
Like she's like, don't hold my purse. I'll throw it on the ground is the vibe that you get from Rachel.
Don't hold my purse. I'll throw it in a flaming dumpster.
Yeah. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And she says it over and over again, that in each scene in which he is sensitive or thoughtful, Rachel rebuffs that sensitivity. When he offers to get her a drink, she doesn't need that. When he wants to have some clarity about the nature of their relationship, she's like, get out of your head. When he tries to establish that she is sober enough to consent to have sex, she like makes fun of him for it.
Yeah.
A big part of Rachel's role is like helping to bring Peter back into the realm of a certain kind of masculinity. I mean, certainly not a conventional quote unquote alpha masculinity, because the role of the Dracula musical at the end of this movie is certainly to establish as a person who is like standing in his power and being successful. He's still like a goofy weirdo.
Yeah.
But that threat to his position as a man is very clear throughout the movie. And it has a lot to do with Sarah's success.
I think it also has to do with the fact that Sarah cheated. I don't think it's just her success. It's that she cheated on him. She cheated on him for a year, and she cheated on him for a year with a dick.
Just an awful, awful man. I do think that there is something in the dynamic between Aldous Snow, who likes sex too much, and whose liking sex too much is made very clear both by his infidelity, but also by his reference to having an
Genital
STI.
herpes. Yeah.
So he likes it too much. And then this young Christian couple who don't know how to have sex also has the wrong relationship to sex. And there seems to be this sense that like the correct way to feel about sex is somewhere in the middle. That like, it's bad if you like it too much. It's bad if you don't like it enough. I mean, I'm sliding into subtext, I think, here, because I do think that even if the movie's not intentionally making an argument via its secondary characters. Certainly it is rooted in a particular ideology about sexuality that is coming through in the kinds of jokes that these secondary characters embody.
Yeah, the one that I found most disturbing, and I do not remember it from previous viewings of the movies because I think I blocked it, is that there is a very sweet hotel worker who is just like consistently nice to Peter and brings Peter with him to slaughter a pig for the luau. Mm-hmm. And you get a scene of a pig squealing in abject terror as Peter tries to slaughter it, and then Peter sobbing and the hotel worker making fun of Peter for sobbing.
Yeah.
And it just feels like not respectful of Hawaiian culture and the luau.
Oh my God, this movie couldn't be less respectful of Hawaiian culture.
No.
Oh my God.
And then it also feels like disrespectful to like Peter having a feeling about having poorly slaughtered this animal, like with no knowledge or know-how, right? Like torturing this animal to death.
That character, I think his name is Kimo. He's he's a native Hawaiian guy, very fat, really is playing a kind of like magical native figure, right? So he is there to like provide some form of spiritual guidance to Peter, the confused and lost white man, without himself having any real interiority. And certainly there is a way in which the slaughtering of the pig is set up as a kind of rite of passage that Peter needs to experience, that in part is about reclaiming masculinity, because a lot of the secondary male characters, the role that they play is to help Peter regain his masculinity. And it's not a coincidence that those are like largely racialized men, you know, who thus are in service to Peter in his personal quest. That role certainly stood out to me, as did the general treatment of Hawaii as a place that white people go to get away from things or to escape from reality, but not like a real place.
Right.
Yeah.
The movie, I think, tries to say Hawaii is a real place through the beach party and the like off the tourist path bar. But when it is saying those things, it is saying like, scary for you, white guy.
Yeah.
It's not saying anything interesting about Hawaii.
Insofar as it is a real place, it is going to be Peter primarily getting beaten up by Hawaiian guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've been dancing around the subtext. Shall we just get into what we think this movie thinks about love, but maybe doesn't know that it is saying about love?
I think that this movie is going, it's hard to be a dopey, nice guy.
In exactly that tone.
I think that this is the whiniest subtext movie ever. I can't always get the hottest, coolest girls, and then they like want things from me.
Yeah.
That is the subtext of this movie. What do you think that this movie is saying subtextually about love?
I mean, we've talked about the cool girl myth, and I think that is really important. And we've talked a little bit about sort of the role of women. I do think, in particular, this movie believes that it is the job of women to fix their romantic partners, like to fix men, and that we get that one really sort of emotionally true scene between Sarah and Peter where he's trying to understand why she cheated on him. And she's like, I tried so hard to like make our relationship work, to get you out of your rut, to get you to leave the apartment and stop wearing sweatpants every day. All of which is like, maybe he's happy wearing sweatpants every day. Sweatpants are comfortable. Calm down. But that's sort of her saying like, I wasn't just absent in this relationship. I was really trying and you weren't reciprocating. But ultimately, Sarah is framed as a failure for the fact that she tried her hardest and could not make Peter happy or successful or self-actualized. And I think that really comes through in the scene where he tries to sleep with her again and she can't get him aroused. And that is very clearly in that scene framed as a failure on her part.
Is it?
Yeah, because he literally screams at her, "You're the devil."
But not for not being able to get him hard, for emasculating him, right? Like he says.
Yeah, that's what he can't, like he can't get aroused because she has emasculated him. She now in the scene, like, can't successfully have a sexual encounter with him because she has emasculated him so much that he is no longer capable of arousal with her. And that is her fault.
I'm going to defend this moment, though, because it's the cheating that made him not trust her enough to have sex with her again. Like, that doesn't seem to be of the same logic to me, where he's like, my dick doesn't trust you anymore because you cheated on me.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's like, that is still played for comedy at her expense.
Yes. Certainly how desperately she wants him to get hard and how like non-empathetic she is. She does not come off well in that scene. There is something else in here that I want to talk about just for a minute, because I think one of the things that this movie wants us to think is that Peter's a good guy.
Oh, for sure. The goodest guy.
And I have two questions about that. And one of them is around this moment. So Sarah and Aldous break up. Sarah has just said all the reasons that she and Peter can't be together. But now that she's single again, she desperately wants him back. And so she's like pulling his face toward her to try to get him to kiss her. She's like really trying to get him back. They try to have sex. He can't get hard. She like goes down on him. He still doesn't get hard. He like keeps trying. And then he can't get hard. He calls her, the devil and leaves and goes straight to tell Rachel.
Yeah.
Because he and Rachel have just told each other that they like each other. And it gets characterized that like he's like Gandhi because he ended a blowjob in the middle of a blowjob. And like, this is such a good guy. And I'm like, he didn't end a blowjob in the middle of a blowjob. He couldn't get hard.
And he let her keep going even though he knew it wasn't working. Like there is a moment where he's like, well, I guess you can keep trying. Like,
yeah,
it's creepy.
Yeah. And I'm like, so that's not what happened.
It's
right?
not.
Like he wasn't having a positive experience. He was getting further emasculated. And so he walked away.
Yeah.
And that is very different. And it drives me nuts that the movie thinks that he was a good guy for walking away from this bad sex. This is not enjoyable sex for him.
Yes, 100%.
You do not get a gold star from walking away from non-enjoyable sex.
If he had been able to get an erection, he would have had sex with her.
Yes.
He didn't stop because he realized that he was cheating on Rachel. He stopped because he couldn't get it up.
That is not the same thing, everyone.
It's really not. It's really not. Okay. I want to talk about one other subtext, but
yes,
the subtext is so dense that I'm actually just going to go ahead and hit the emergency stop button.
Do it.
Because I want to talk about the genre of the beta male comedy. Okay, so I want to begin here by making a note, which is that there is no such thing as beta males and there is no such thing as alpha males. This is made up nonsense based on bad animal science. There were some behavioral studies of wolves done decades ago that found that wolves had this sort of pack order with an alpha male who violently defended his position, and then all of the other males were beta males who were subservient to the alpha male. Since then, animal behaviorists have pretty much entirely discarded this theory based on the fact that that was a study of wolves in captivity, where they were violently wrenched out of their normal social orders and familial orders, and so fought amongst each other because they were in captivity. But wolves in the wild don't have alpha beta pairing or dynamics. They're families. Alpha and beta males is nothing. It's based in nothing. Every wolf behavior scientist is like, please, God, could people stop talking about alpha wolves? It's nothing. We're very embarrassed about it. Please stop saying it. And the whole internet is like, no, we won't. We'll never stop saying it. So, like, it's important to recognize that this is like a very particular cultural construction that got taken up by a sort of anxious male subculture fixated on the idea of certain models of masculinity, right? Alpha masculinity versus beta masculinity. And there is a very interesting scholar, David Grevin, who has written about this genre of the beta male comedy, which is this form of comedy that was at its height in the mid to late 2000s, that he identifies as sort of being preceded by the gross out teen comedy a la American Pie, and then being followed by the rise of the bromance a la I Love You Man.
With Jason Segel. And Paul Rudd again. Mm-hmm. Paul Rudd's character in that movie is named Peter, because when you are a man who is being emasculated, your name is Peter, apparently. So this genre is really interested in centering stories around beta males, which is a man who does not adhere to conventional Hollywood male hero main character characteristics. So he might be like scared of killing a pig.
He might be scared of killing a pig. He might cry.
Right.
He also probably doesn't have a conventional masculine body, for example, which is really important in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. We get full frontal nudity from Jason Segel in the basically first main scene. And part of what we're being shown is a kind of like soft, non-Hollywood honed body. You know, they're likely to be physically unconventional looking, maybe unemployed or underemployed, and in other ways just sort of are not your conventional leading man.
Eating a whole box of cereal out of a big mixing bowl.
100%. And a really central point that David Grevin is making about the beta male comedy is that it is a form of movie that is extremely anxious about masculinity and that is particularly rooted in homophobia. So his argument is that the rise of the beta male comedy comes in the wake of the rise of queer cinema, and particularly the anxiety that queer cinema creates around the depiction of the male body as a potential object of the gaze rather than the subject doing the gazing. And we see that playing out in movies like Forgetting Sarah Marshall via the fixation on showing Jason Segel naked and on the obsession over his emasculation and his need to regain masculinity through friendships with other straight men that have like a big no homo energy, so to speak. You know, we've talked a little bit in the past about homosocial triangulation and the sort of anxiety of the possibility of homosexuality that underpins a lot of like the bromance comedy or a lot of movies that depict male friendship. And that anxiety is certainly latent in this movie, because otherwise, why would Peter get called a woman so much? Right? Like, that's really important. This is also, you know, for important context, in the States, like still 7 years before same-sex marriage is legalized. So like the sort of low-key casual erasure of the possibility of homosexuality also is rampant in this movie, right? Like when he goes to the restaurant and Jonah Hill's character is asking him if his wife or girlfriend is there.
Yeah, I know.
That was such a startling moment for me of just
me
being
too.
like,
Which is funny because Jonah Hill's character is coded as a little bit queer, right?
Absolutely. And that's played exclusively for laughs, right?
Yeah.
And even Aldous Snow, who is sort of a little like glam rock coded, at least, is like so put off by the attentions of this young man.
Which I would be too. If I'm in my hotel room, like in my very expensive hotel room, and someone comes and delivers like fake room service and then won't leave my room, I do think that part of what's going on in this dynamic, I think it is coded homophobically, but part of what's going on in this dynamic is talking about celebrity as like full objectification, right? And
Yes.
Jonah Hill is treating Russell Brand just as like he's just an object.
Yeah, and that's something that needs to be rejected because
Yeah.
the process of objectification that celebrity entails is, again, emasculating. Right? So he needs to reject that in favor of a model of celebrity that involves groupies known as the Sorrow Suckers.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to end with a great quote from a David Grevin article called I Love You, Brom Bones, Beta Male Comedies in American Culture, where he writes, quote, for all of the apparently deeply worrisome messages they convey about the current state of American manhood, unable to man up, leave home, develop lucrative careers, and start families of their own, beta male comedies offer a fairly cohesive portrait of an American masculinity comfortably inhabiting its privileges that include the right to be misogynistic, racist, and homophobic, end quote. And I think that like reading this piece by Grevin really made me be like, oh yeah, actually this really explains a lot of what I found uncomfortable viewing this movie again, because I also remember finding these beta male comedies appealing in the mid-2000s because I was excited to see non-normative masculinity on screen. And I see now how, like, rewatching it last night, I was like, oh, there's actually nothing subversive about this. This is ultimately about a straight white man continuing to sit comfortably in the seat of power that involves women having to be subservient to him, that involves a kind of rejection of even the possibility of emasculation or homosexuality, that involves the structural subservience of people of color to his personal journey, and that ultimately the happy ending is that he has achieved his artistic vision. And can Judd Apatow imagine anything happier than a white man getting to make his fun little project with his friends? He cannot.
I remember defending Judd Apatow, like really getting into it with someone actually in 2009 about the movie I Love You, Man. I was at a party in LA, and this guy who certainly thought of himself as an alpha male was like, these movies are pathetic. Like, they're just about pathetic men. And I was like, it is so flipping refreshing to not just see Fight Club, American Pie, like overtly toxic.
Yeah.
Clearly they want to kind of murder me men on screen. And I was like, no, this feels huge. This feels nice. Like, none of the men in these movies want to murder me. And I'm just like, looking back, I'm like, God, my standards were so low. These were just men who I like wasn't as scared. They just want to humiliate me, not kill me.
Yep.
And that really felt like such a win.
I absolutely identify with this sense of getting to see a male character on screen who I think would probably not try to harm me if we were hanging out together.
Yeah.
Was like, whoa, can you believe? And I gotta say that, like, my breakup with this whole genre of movie, the sort of subset of movies, came with the Danny McBride vehicle, Your Highness. And I remember watching that movie in a theater, and it was me and my friend Jesse and then two guys. Like, we were watching a matinee and the theater was empty. And there were a lot of jokes that felt like they were really edging towards the punchline being sexual violence. And the two guys in the theater were laughing their asses off. And I was like, oh, I actually don't feel safe right now. So, like, yeah, this movie, I agree. Like, I think Jason Segel does a really good job of playing a dude who I genuinely find likable and sympathetic and funny and not scary.
Yeah.
And also, I think a lot of that might just have to do with like him, like him and Paul Rudd, like the two of them. But I think in less capable hands, this genre is actually full of the threat of violence towards women.
Yeah, this is right, like our theme of 2008, right? Like this was a very specific moment. And what I really remember watching this movie in 2008 is feeling as though we had crossed a Rubicon. And I don't know if this is actually true. I just remember thinking it at the time. I was like, oh my God, there is, no pun intended, tit for tat, male nudity, female nudity in this movie.
Yeah.
Like for every time we see Mila Kunis's boobs, we see Jason Segel's penis. And that
fun fact, that's really Jason Segel's penis, but those aren't really Mila Kunis's boobs.
Oh, I love that. So that felt to me, again, no pun intended, as though Jason Segel was like, I have skin in the game on nudity, right? Like, I really did not mean for that to pun. But like, if we expect women's bodies to be on film, then I'm going to put my body on film.
Yeah.
And that felt like a gift. Like, I don't care about seeing Jason Segel's penis, but I was just like, oh, this is a man who's like willing to put his
He's willing
dick
to
where his
hang
mouth
dong.
is. Yeah. It felt generous to me in 2008.
I read, and I have not fact checked this, but I read that all of the nudity in that first scene was actually a Judd Apatow call, that he was supposed to be naked when she first came in and then put his clothes on, and that Judd Apatow thought it was funnier if he stayed naked through the entire thing. You know, there certainly is still that like willingness to make your own naked body the butt of the joke. And the movie's obviously aware of the gendered nature of on-screen nudity because of the subplot of all of the pictures of girls flashing that are in the men's washroom, and also because of the scene where Sarah talks about how she's worried that her career won't be able to progress because she's not willing to do nudity on screen. So like, it's obviously is also, I agree that the movie is also thinking about that.
Hannah, that actually leads me to a question that I had. So the big romantic gesture that Jason Segel does in this movie is that he finds out when they go to the like authentic Hawaiian bar, he goes to the bathroom, and above the bathroom are pictures of drunk women who Polaroids have been taken of them at this bar, flashing the bartender, and a collage has been put up. And while Jason Segel is peeing, he notices that Rachel has a photo up, and he asks Rachel if she knows, and she, in like a chill way, is like, yeah, I hate it. I've asked the manager of the bar to take it down, and he won't because he says it'll ruin the artistic integrity of the collage. And then Jason Segel's like, do you want me to go ask to take it down? And she's like, no, he will literally kill you.
He will actually kill you. Yeah.
And then, so at the end of the movie, when he has messed up by being willing to end a blowjob early and confesses to Rachel, he goes and takes down the photo of Rachel flashing that, like, Rachel has not consented for this photo to be up. She's actually actively asked for this photo to be taken down. And he's trying to make this happen for her. And he does. He gets beaten up in order to get this photo. He hands it to Rachel. You see this photo like 9 times.
Yeah. Because the movie really wants to make sure that we see that photo every time it's referenced.
And I'm just like, if this is supposed to be about maintaining the dignity of a woman who unwillingly showed her boobs, why do you keep flipping showing me her boobs?
Yep.
And that to me is the movie. I'm like, you say that you're about one thing, but you sure keep doing something else.
Also, he hands her the picture in her place of work.
Yeah.
Which also feels really inappropriate. He just slaps it down on the counter. She is at work.
Here's a nude photo of you.
Put it in an envelope.
Yeah, all of this also just reminded me of, in terms of the 2008 of it all, reminded me that this is still when Girls Gone Wild would have ads on primetime TV, right?
Wow.
You know, the company went bankrupt in 2013. But so it used to be like you were watching Family Matters in Full House, and you would get an ad for this DVD that you could buy of drunk college-aged women consenting while obliterated out of their minds to flashing a camera, and you could just get a montage of women. I mean, I haven't seen these, so this is what I imagine that it is based on the ad, that it's just like a montage of 18-year-old girls who are like barely legal, are not in corpus mentis, right? Signing away their rights to having people look at their boobs on film.
Yeah. Yeah. And that being like a mainstream thing and a thing
totally mainstream. Yeah. No critique of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're on the tail end of a profoundly misogynistic decade.
Yeah.
As we have talked about, the 2000s were a bad time for the treatment of women in media, as opposed to all the other good times.
Yeah, this collage completely makes sense as something that would have come out of that era.
Sure does. And contributes to that sense of Hawaii as being a vacation destination more than a real place.
A spring break.
Yeah.
Okay, Hannah, you should watch this movie if
you think Kristen Bell's really hot and you want to see her in a series of increasingly bonkers holiday looks.
And I do.
Vanessa, you should watch this movie if
you love a bit. This movie loves bits.
Yeah.
And I love bits. And I think that it's why I got distracted and liked this movie for so long.
I mean, I think that we could probably have a whole other conversation about the pleasure of the bit, the pleasure of the riff, the pleasure of the list, you know, there's other stuff going on in this comedy, and there are still some laughs to be had.
Yeah. Twice I still chuckled and was like, tee hee hee.
Yeah. I still think Paul Rudd is very funny. He makes a little face when he realizes he's 44. He makes his little Paul Rudd face where he's like, what? What a guy.
I love him. Love him. Okay, next week we're going to be watching the final scene, more male nudity.
And more Dracula.
So as much as a location can ever be a character in anything, I think we could all agree that Hawaii is a character in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. And Hawaii has been a character in cinema and TV really since the beginning of cinema. And that is not something that I really know anything about. And so we thought we would get an expert on the phone to help us decode some of what Hawaii is symbolizing in this film, in the way that film has used Hawaii as metaphor, as setting, as character, and as a way to tell a certain story about whiteness and America. And to that end, we got Jeffrey Geiger on the phone. Jeffrey is a professor in the Department of Literature, Film, and Theater Studies at the University of Essex, where he established the Center for Film and Screen Media in 2001. He's the author of Facing the Pacific, Polynesia and the U.S. Imperial Imagination, and the co-editor of Film Analysis, A Norton Reader. Let's get Jeffrey on the phone. Hi, Jeffrey.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited, given this weird movie, to learn more about the history of Hawaii. And so I just want to start super basic. There's obviously a long history of the white gaze on Hawaii and production of media about Hawaii. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about where that starts and how it ties into the forces of U.S. imperialism.
Well, it goes way back. I mean, I'll focus more on the U.S. relationship to Hawaii, which pretty much starts in the mid-19th century. You have whaling ships, you have exploration, and then by about 1860, with Abraham Lincoln, Secretary of State, who was called Seward, you had this push towards what came to be known as the sort of American imperialist project, which was more or less an extension of Manifest Destiny, this notion of a kind of God-given right to expand west. And by 1890, the US government declared the Western frontier closed. So there very quickly became questions about whether the United States had kind of reached its limits, whether there was going to be overcrowding. And there was a fairly strong tendency at that point within the government to consider moving even further west and expanding outward into the Pacific. Now, the actual annexation of Hawaii as a US territory, initially, President Grover Cleveland was against the annexation of Hawaii because it basically forcefully ejected the Hawaiian royal family, who were the leaders of Hawaii, and particularly Queen Liliuokalani. Now, this all changed with the Spanish-American War. At this point, the president was William McKinley, and William McKinley saw American expansion as a kind of God-given right, and he explicitly stated that Hawaii was as important to the United States as California, as a territory and eventually as a state, because Pacific expansion was essential to the United States asserting global power. Now, this moved, obviously into the 20th century. You move into what's known as the Pacific Paradise genre. It was kind of an extension of the Western. So you have both this kind of actual historical American expansion, which is going on politically and culturally into the Pacific. But at the same time, Hollywood in particular and American media and, dime novels and fictional works. Some people call it Hulawood, the idea of the Pacific fantasy, which really was an extension of the Western, that really took off in the 1920s. And films such as Bird of Paradise with Dolores Del Rio. Anyway, I hope that gives you some background.
Yeah. It's just wild because I feel like I was raised by American public schools to not think of America as an imperial force.
Yeah, that's right. I went through the same school system and I also didn't hear very much. I mean, Manifest Destiny was presented as a kind of positive thing in many ways.
Right.
The westward expansion.
Right. And that it was constantly called to the West, right? That there were material reasons why white people did the right thing by going west. And then the cultural backing of things like movies to make us believe that these are all good things. Yeah. Anyway, so Forgetting Sarah Marshall is set in the context of a Hawaiian resort, and it's playing with the idea of Hawaii as an idealized space of fantasy because our main character is so miserable. But it can only play with that idea because it's so assumed and ingrained in our culture that Hawaii is that place, right? It's the honeymoon place. It's this romantic ideal. So from what I understand, the idea of Hawaii as a kind of utopia predates mass tourism in the 1960s. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the way that that mythology was built.
Well, Hawaii was a kind of central stopping point for, the explosion of tourism, which took place when you started cruising for pleasure, which took place around the late 1910s into the 20s. And by the 1930s, between the two world wars, there was just this obsession with travel and that whole idea of the world cruise, the kind of for pleasure, not for science or not for discovery. That became really central, especially among very wealthy people. And I guess one thing I would add, to what you said is Hawaii becomes a space of fantasy, a space of escape, but it's also a playground for the wealthy. And that really goes right back to the idea of the world cruise. I mean, the world cruise in the 20s and the 30s, when people were using Hawaii as a central stopping off point, one of those cruises would have cost people nearly as much as a luxury car, would today.
Whoa.
They were incredibly expensive investments. So people, especially wealthy, were kind of going on cruises. There was the rise of photography, the rise of amateur filming. They were bringing back their own images, their own photographs, their own films. And this was dovetailing with what Hollywood was doing with films like, Bird of Paradise, Aloha, which had Raquel Torres, The Island of Dr. Moreau, where you have that kind of space of fantasy, but it's also mixed with a kind of fear of the other and a fear of monstrosity. So that's the other element too, which I guess would add on to what you were saying, is Hawaii becomes a space of escape and fantasy and pleasures for the rich and often for the super rich. But the Pacific in general and Polynesia also carries with it, I guess you could say, a kind of a threat that needs to be overcome and kind of marginalized. And I guess you also see that in this film, that the Hawaiian presence, the indigenous presence is so marginal to the main characters. It's there. It's like signaled, but pushed out into the margins.
To build on that, I mean, I think that one of the important dynamics that we see in this movie, and that we, of course, see across film in general, is that there is our main character is wealthy and white, and then the characters of color, indigenous characters who live in Hawaii, and the hotel staff are just there as sort of like helpers to move him past heartbreak. And I know that that dynamic is something that has a long precedent in films. I mean, with, the Mammy figure, but also films about Hawaii. And so I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, now that you say that, I hadn't really thought of it in the context of this film, but it maps on very obviously to that Pacific fantasy genre. It's usually a white hero who escapes to the Pacific for one reason or another, to the so-called, deserted island, and finds a kind of native rebirth. And so, yeah, there's this idea, and that particularly comes around again, between the wars and into the post-war era, post-Second World War, that idea of a kind of Western sickness, that idea that modern life and modern cultured life and cosmopolitan life and mechanized work is somehow really making people lose touch with nature and with authenticity, and ultimately making them sick. So the Hawaiian, and particularly the more general kind of Polynesian fantasy film, is often about a white protagonist, a male white protagonist, in a way trying to find their mojo again, trying to get healthy, trying to get back to nature. And always there's, again, the idea of the romance that's part of that. There's always some kind of romantic element to the Pacific fantasy genre.
Is there anything else that you just want to make sure our audience knows about this subject, about the way that Hawaii is represented in film, before we say goodbye?
I would just say that Hawaii and the Pacific in general have always tapped into Western fantasies of purity, of escape. And there's always been a kind of nostalgic backwards move here, a kind of backwards gaze at an exotic ideal, maybe an exotic ideal that never existed. And this fits very much with America's own sense of its past and its history.
Yeah.
That there's always something better, more pure, untouched there in the past that Americans need to get in touch with somehow. I mean, the frontier thesis, the famous frontier thesis that supported Manifest Destiny, kind of placed Americans as against what they called old Europe and kind of tired, worn out Europeans. And America was fresh and vital. And it's partly because of their connection to nature and the frontier. And that very much comes into the Pacific fantasy genre. And I guess, as you're suggesting, interesting close analysis there. Maybe it's also in this film too.
I mean, it's really interesting with opera and puppetry. It is almost going back to old Europe in order to get his masculinity, some sort of like Dracula, Transylvania, Eastern Europe thing that I don't think I have the time to totally break down. But there are definitely different kinds of whiteness portrayed.
Yeah, if you did, there'd be also a lot to say about the vampire theme and the vampire subtext, because I mean, there you have a usually aristocratic, white, bloated bourgeois male who's effectively feeding on young women. And that there, yeah, maybe there's a lot more in this film than meets the eye.
Jeffrey, is this film brilliant? And we just didn't know it.
There you
is
go.
a commentary, an incisive commentary on different forms of whiteness.
I guess all films are, really. A lot of American films.
True.
But now I guess I'm going to have to start, I'm going to have to start teaching it.
Oh my God, let me know. Thank you so much for your great scholarship and for your time. And this was just such a lovely conversation.
Thanks for the interesting questions. And you've now made me think a lot deeper about this film than I was thinking before.
I'm sorry. You've been listening to Hot and Bothered. We are a small show, so we need your support to run. If you can, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where you get a bonus scene for every movie we cover. We are a Not Sorry production. I'm the executive producer. We are edited and produced and lovingly curated by the amazing Ariana Nettleman, and we are distributed by Acast. We love our soulmate level patrons. Molly Reilly, who we would chase through an airport to declare our love to. Elizabeth Schweinsberg, whose heart we would play a game of one-on-one basketball for. Lauren Byer O'Connell, who we would call up on stage to dance with us in front of the whole summer camp. Claudia Hammerman, who we would give the whole door to float on, even if there was room for us both. Avi Lichtenstein, who we would make every person in the kingdom try on a shoe for. Kristen Hall, who we would travel through a time portal to spend the 19th century with. Shiri Yadlin, who we would write a sonnet about and then read it in front of the whole class. Delia Rose, who we are majorly, totally, but crazy in love with. And Leia Goldberg, who we would carry on our backs as we jump from tree to tree like a little spider monkey. Huge thanks this week to Jeffrey Geiger for getting on the phone with us to talk to us about Hawaii, and our team, Julia Argy, Nikki Zoltan, AJ Aramas, Courtney Brown, Anissa Ahmed, Danny Langley, and Stephanie Balsell.